This is Tony Scott with TFS, and this is a TFS Tech Tip. In this series, we're going to be covering the NIST cybersecurity framework, and we're going to be breaking that down subcategory by subcategory because ultimately, we're trying to help you improve your data security one control at a time. So in today's episode, we're going to cover the PR.AC-7, which is Protect, Access Control, and the 7 is for user authentication. So let's first of all start by what is user authentication? What is multi-factor authentication? If you've looked at a cybersecurity insurance policy, you've seen multi-factor authentication. It is certainly a very popular topic these days. What user authentication is basically proving that the person that is logging in really is that person. So if I'm logging in as Tony Scott, well, we're trying to authenticate that it's really me that's logging in. So the first means of that would be credentials, right? My user ID and password. Well, when you have a multi-factor, another factor for that, that's some other way to make sure that it really is me. So one example of that would be a multi-factor would be sending an authentication code to my mobile phone. So that would be my credentials, then my mobile phone is getting a code that I'm having to enter to get in. You also could use an authentication app to get that code. So there's a couple of different ways to go about that multi-factor, but that's really what we're doing there. So in this series, we're going to cover three main questions every time, and that is so what, do what, and now what. So on the so what part of this, so what if we don't have multi-factor authentication, right? What does it really matter? Well, in the data security world, so what equates to what's the risk? So what's the risk? Well, the risk is that you have unauthorized access to sensitive data, and pretty much our entire client base houses sensitive data. They're the custodians of that data, whether it's one end of the spectrum of healthcare, all the way from insurance companies to public accounting firms to car dealerships. They're all housing sensitive data. Some of those, i.e. healthcare, literally lives are at stake related to those systems and that data, all the way down the line, at the very least, people's livelihoods are at stake. And so this is a really big responsibility for our client base to make sure that they're protecting that data that they're housing. So back to the so what. All right, so what that risk is, hey, it's unauthorized access. Not only that, but it's unauthorized access to the systems that could introduce malware if those people are not really who they say they are. So let's go from there. Let's jump right into the do what. So what do you need to do? Well, you need to go and look and say, okay, what are our tier 1 systems? What are the most important systems that are housing the sensitive data? And let's look to enable multi-factor on these systems. Now, obviously, you've got to look at your process flow. You've got to look at what makes sense, the capability in the software. So there's a lot of things that you've got to look at, but you've got to go down that road. You've got to go down that process. And what you're really going to want to do is go, okay, well, which systems do we need to implement this? And let's get this engaged. So for us, we're a small company. It's a little easier to do this. Pretty much every system that we have is using multi-factor authentication. So, all right, we talked about so what, we talked about do what, now what. Let's talk about the now what of this. So what do you want to do now? You want to make sure that you document. Okay, document. How did you decide that these are the tier 1 systems and these are the only ones that we're going to implement multi-factor? How did you decide that you weren't going to implement multi-factor? And then ultimately document that you have multi-factor in place, because when you go to do your risk assessment, that documentation is really important, or you can't put down, oh yes, we have this control in place. And ultimately, if you were to be audited by an outside agency, whether that be federal or state government, they're going to want to understand, well, you said that you have multi-factor. Where's the evidence? I want to see some support. How did you come to that conclusion? They're also going to ask the question of, well, how did you decide not to put multi-factor in place for these other systems? So documenting that entire process is critical. So, hey, this is just what we're trying to do to help our clients and get you guys to a point where you can improve your security one control at a time. Hopefully this has been helpful, and I look forward to speaking with you guys next time on the next episode.